The white-haired stranger appeared from nowhere in the fog, his silhouette so achingly familiar that Helena Carmichael's grief shattered open like a wound that had never healed.
Thomas?
Her voice broke on his name, the name she hadn't spoken aloud in 3 years. The figure moved closer through the swirling mist that blanketed the cemetery, and her heart lurched with impossible hope. That height, those shoulders, the way he walked, it was him, it had to be him. Thomas, oh God, I thought. She stumbled forward on legs that felt weak, tears already streaming down her face. The fog parted just enough to reveal pale features, white hair catching the moonlight, and she threw herself at him without thinking, without breathing, her arms wrapping around a body that felt solid and real and there. I missed you, she sobbed into his chest. I missed you so much. How are you here? They said you were dead. They said. The arms that caught her were strong, unfamiliar in their certainty. But she couldn't think past the overwhelming rush of emotion. 3 years of loneliness, of sleeping in an empty bed, of waking up and remembering all over again that he was gone. 3 years of visiting this cemetery every week to talk to a headstone. Please tell me this isn't a dream, she whispered. Please tell me you're real. I am real. The voice that answered was deep, ancient, nothing like Thomas's warm tenor. But I am not who you believe me to be. Helena froze. Slowly she pulled back and the fog shifted enough for her to see him clearly. White hair, yes, but long and straight, falling past his shoulders. Skin so pale it seemed to glow in the darkness. Eyes that caught the light like a cat's, silver and luminous and utterly inhuman. Features that were beautiful in a way that made her chest ache. Sharp and regal and cold as winter. Not Thomas. Not even human. She should have pulled away. Should have screamed, should have run. But those arms were still around her, holding her with a gentleness that seemed at odds with everything else about him, and she was so tired of being alone. I'm sorry, she managed, her voice small. I thought the fog. I couldn't see you thought I was someone you loved. It wasn't a question. Those silver eyes studied her face with an intensity that should have frightened her. Someone you lost, my husband. Fresh tears spilled over. He died 3 years ago. Car accident. I come here every week to it's stupid. Talking to a grave. Grief is not stupid. His thumb brushed away a tear from her cheek, the gesture startlingly tender. It is the price we pay for love. Helena finally found the strength to step back, wrapping her arms around herself. The night air felt colder without his warmth. What are you doing in a cemetery at midnight? I might ask you the same question. The corner of his mouth lifted slightly. Though I suspect I already know the answer. I couldn't sleep. She looked down at Thomas's grave, the flowers she'd brought earlier, already wilting in the November cold. I never can on our anniversary. We would have been married 8 years today. The stranger followed her gaze to the headstone. Thomas Carmichael, beloved husband, the world was brighter with you in it. He read the inscription quietly. You chose those words? Yes. Her throat tightened. Because it was true. Everything felt dimmer after he died. Like someone turned down the lights on the whole world. And now you wander cemeteries in the fog, hoping to find shadows that look like him. It should have sounded cruel, but his tone held only understanding. Helena wrapped her coat tighter around herself. Who are you? My name is Vladric Westerling. He inclined his head in a gesture that belonged to another century. And I am the reason you should not be walking alone in graveyards after dark. Are you going to hurt me? No. The answer was immediate, almost fierce. You are under my protection now, whether you realize it or not. I don't understand. Vladric moved closer, and she saw the way the moonlight seemed to illuminate him from within. The inhuman grace of his movements. I am what your folklore calls a vampire, Helena Carmichael. I am old enough to have watched your city rise from nothing, powerful enough that my kind call me king, and you have just wept in my arms over a love I cannot help but respect. Helena's rational mind told her to run. Vampires weren't real, they were stories, myths, Halloween costumes. But she had felt the coolness of his skin, seen the predatory stillness of his body, watched the fog seem to part around him like it recognized a greater darkness. Vampires, she repeated slowly. Yes, and you're their king, among other titles. She should have been terrified. Instead, she felt a strange calm settle over her, the same numbness that had carried her through Thomas's funeral. Are you going to kill me? I have already told you no. Vladric's expression darkened. You seem remarkably unconcerned with your own safety. Maybe I'm too tired to care anymore. The words came out before she could stop them, raw and honest. Maybe I've been going through the motions for 3 years and I'm just empty. Something flickered in those silver eyes, recognition perhaps, or understanding. You are not empty, you are grieving. There is a difference. Is there? Helena laughed, but it sounded broken, because it all feels the same to me. Wake up, go to work, come home, sleep, visit his grave on weekends, pretend I'm okay when my friends ask, repeat forever. That is not living. No, she agreed quietly, but I don't know how to do anything else. Vladric was silent for a long moment, studying her with those unnerving eyes. Then he held out his hand. Come with me. Where? Away from this place of death. Somewhere warm. I would speak with you further, and you are shivering. Helena looked at his outstretched hand. Every survival instinct screamed that this was dangerous, that she should run back to her car and never return to this cemetery again. But those same instincts had been quiet for 3 years, buried under grief, and the thought of going back to her empty apartment made her want to weep. She took his hand. His fingers closed around hers, cool and strong, and the world lurched. The cemetery vanished in a blur of shadow and speed, and Helena gasped as reality reformed around them. They stood in an ornate room that looked like it belonged in a castle, stone walls hung with tapestries, a fireplace large enough to stand in, furniture that was clearly antique but perfectly preserved. Where are we? She turned in a slow circle, trying to process what had just happened. My home. Beneath the city, in halls your kind forgot centuries ago. Vladric guided her to a chair near the fire. Sit. You need warmth. Helena sank into the chair, her legs suddenly weak. You can teleport? After a fashion. I moved very quickly and I brought you with me. He poured something amber into a crystal glass and handed it to her. Drink. It will help with the shock. She took a sip and felt warmth spread through her chest. Brandy, expensive and smooth. This is insane, yes. Vladric settled into the chair across from her, moving with liquid grace. But no less real for it. Why did you bring me here? Because you were going to stand in that cemetery until dawn, slowly freezing, hoping that the fog would show you your husband's ghost again. His silver eyes pinned her in place. Because I have watched countless mortals destroy themselves with grief, and I found myself unwilling to watch you do the same. You don't even know me. I know enough. He leaned forward slightly. I know you loved deeply enough to still weep 3 years later. I know you are lost without the one you loved. I know that when you thought I was him, the joy on your face was the most beautiful thing I have seen in decades. Helena's breath caught. Why would you care about any of that? Because I am ancient, Helena, and immortal, and I have forgotten what it means to feel things as intensely as you do. His voice dropped lower, almost rough. Because when you threw yourself into my arms, for one moment I remembered what it was like to be needed, to matter to someone beyond politics and power. I don't understand. Neither do I. Vladric stood, pacing to the fireplace. The flames cast shadows across his pale features, making him look even more otherworldly. I should have let you go, should have disappeared back into the fog and forgotten I ever saw you. But I did not. I caught you when you fell into my arms, and I held you while you wept. And now I find I am unwilling to simply return you to your empty life. What are you saying? He turned to face her, and the intensity in his gaze made her heart race. I am saying that I would like to know you, Helena Carmichael. I would like to understand what kind of love could leave someone so shattered that they mistake a monster for salvation. You're not a monster. I have killed more people than you could count. I have ruled through fear and blood for centuries. I am everything your kind should run from, and yet you held me while I cried over another man. Helena set down her glass and stood. You brought me somewhere warm. You're trying to help me, even though you don't know why. Perhaps I am simply bored after centuries of existence. I don't believe that. Vladric closed the distance between them in 2 strides, moving so fast she barely saw him move. He stopped inches away, close enough that she could see flecks of darker silver in his eyes. You should be afraid of me. I know. She met his gaze steadily, but I'm not. Maybe because I've already lost everything that mattered. Maybe because I'm too broken to care. Or maybe because when you held me, I felt safe for the first time in 3 years. His hand came up to cup her face, thumb tracing her cheekbone. You are not broken. You are grieving. And there is a difference. You said that before. Because it bears repeating. His touch was gentle, reverent. Broken things cannot feel as deeply as you do. Broken things do not love graves with flowers and visit them faithfully. You are wounded, yes, but wounds can heal. Tears pricked Helena's eyes again. I don't know how. Then perhaps I might help you learn. Vladric's voice softened. If you would permit it. Why? The word came out as a whisper. Why would you want to? Because in 800 years of existence I have never met anyone who looked at me the way you did in that cemetery. With hope, with love, even if it was meant for someone else. His thumb brushed away a tear. Because I am old and tired and so very alone, and you remind me that there are still things in this world worth protecting. Helena's heart hammered against her ribs. This was insane, all of it. Vampires and underground palaces and an ancient king who spoke about loneliness like he understood it in his bones. But she had been living in a fog for 3 years, going through motions, existing but not living. and this strange, dangerous creature was offering her something she hadn't felt since Thomas died, a reason to feel something other than grief. "I don't know what I can offer you," she said honestly. "I'm just a widow who works in a bookstore and talks to graves. You can offer me your company, your stories, your grief and your memories and whatever pieces of yourself you are willing to share." Vladric's expression softened. "I do not expect you to love me, Helena. I do not even expect you to trust me, not yet. But I would like the chance to know you. And if I say yes, what happens then? Then you come back tomorrow night, and the night after we talk. I show you the world that exists in the shadows of your own. You teach me what it means to be human again, and perhaps I help you remember what it means to live." It was the worst idea Helena had ever considered. Spending time with a vampire, with a creature who admitted to centuries of killing, who moved too fast and looked too perfect and made her feel things she had no right to feel when Thomas had only been dead 3 years. But Thomas was gone, and she was so tired of being alone. "Tomorrow night," she heard herself say. "Where do I meet you?" The smile that crossed Vladric's face was radiant. "The cemetery, midnight. I will find you in the fog." He took her home the same way he'd brought her a blur of motion that left her dizzy and breathless. When reality settled, she stood on her apartment building's front steps, Vladric beside her like a ghost made solid. "Sleep well, Helena Carmichael." He pressed a kiss to her knuckles, the gesture courtly and old-fashioned. "I will count the hours until I see you again." Then he was gone, vanishing into the shadows as if he'd never been there at all. Helena stood alone in the November cold, her hand still tingling where his lips had touched, and wondered what she had just agreed to. Inside her apartment, she moved through her nighttime routine on autopilot. But when she finally lay down in bed, she didn't reach for Thomas's photo the way she usually did. Instead, she stared at the ceiling and thought about silver eyes, and a voice that spoke of loneliness like it was an old friend. For the first time in 3 years, she fell asleep without crying. The bookstore where Helena worked was a quiet place tucked between a coffee shop and a vintage clothing store, the kind of establishment that survived on loyal regulars and tourists looking for something quaint. She had worked there for 5 years, drawn to the silence and the smell of old paper, the way books offered escape from reality. Today, reality felt like a dream. "You seem different," her coworker Marcus observed during their lunch break. He was 23, perpetually cheerful, and had been trying to set her up with his friends since Thomas died. "Good different. Did something happen?" Helena thought about white hair and silver eyes and impossible speed. "I met someone." Marcus nearly dropped his sandwich. "You what?" "Helena, that's amazing. Who is he? Where did you meet? Please tell me you're actually going to go out with him." "I'm seeing him tonight, actually." "Okay, I'm going to need details, all the details. You haven't shown interest in anyone since—" He stopped, wincing. "Sorry, it's okay." And surprisingly, it was. "His name is Vladric. We met at the cemetery last night." "That's kind of morbid." "I know." Helena smiled slightly, but he was kind, and he understood about Thomas, about grief. Marcus studied her carefully. "You really like him." "I don't know him well enough to like him yet, but I want to." The admission felt strange on her tongue, disloyal somehow. "Is that terrible?" "Thomas hasn't even been gone that long." 3 years is a long time, Helena, and Thomas would want you to be happy." Marcus reached across the table to squeeze her hand. "You've been existing, not living. If this guy makes you feel something again, that's not terrible. That's human." The same thing Vladric had said, that she was grieving, not broken. Maybe they were right. The rest of the workday dragged. Helena found herself watching the clock, counting down the hours until midnight. She left early, pleading a headache that wasn't entirely a lie. At home, she stood in front of her closet for 20 minutes before settling on jeans and a sweater, warm, practical, nothing fancy. This wasn't a date, this was just talking, getting to know someone. Someone who happened to be an 800-year-old vampire king. She arrived at the cemetery at midnight, her breath misting in the cold air. The fog was thicker tonight, rolling between headstones like something alive. Helena made her way to Thomas's grave and stood there, hands in her pockets. "I met someone," she told the headstone quietly. "I know that probably sounds crazy. I know I should wait longer, should grieve properly, but he makes me feel less alone, and I've been so lonely without you." She touched the cold marble. "I hope that's okay. I hope you'd understand. He would want you to be happy." Helena turned to find Vladric emerging from the fog, dressed in dark clothes that made his pale hair and skin seem to glow. He moved silently, a predator in his element, but his expression was gentle. "You can't know that," she said. "Yes, I can. Because he loved you, and true love wants joy for the beloved, even after death." Vladric stopped beside her, reading Thomas's headstone again. He was young when he died. 32, a drunk driver ran a red light. Helena's voice was flat. Thomas was just driving home from work. Wrong place, wrong time, and you have carried that grief ever since. What else was I supposed to do? He was my everything, my best friend, my partner, the person I was going to grow old with. She wiped at her eyes angrily, and then he was just gone, no warning, no goodbye, just gone. Vladric's hand found hers, fingers interlacing. Tell me about him, about the man you loved. They walked through the cemetery as Helena talked. She told him about meeting Thomas in college, about their terrible first date where they'd gotten caught in a rainstorm and ended up laughing in a diner until dawn. About the way he made terrible puns and loved old movies, and cried during documentaries about animals. About their wedding, small and perfect in her parents' backyard. About the life they'd built together, ordinary and beautiful. Vladric listened without interrupting, his hand steady in hers. When she finally fell silent, they had reached the cemetery gates. He sounds like he was worth loving, Vladric said quietly. He was. Helena looked up at him. Is it strange that I'm here with you, talking about him? Not strange, honest. Vladric turned to face her fully. I do not expect you to forget him, Helena. I do not want to replace him or compete with a ghost. But I would like to be part of your present if you will allow it. I don't understand what you want from me. Neither do I entirely. He smiled slightly. I only know that when I saw you last night, something in me woke that I thought had died centuries ago. Interest, curiosity, the desire to know another soul. You're immortal. I'm going to age and die. Yes, that doesn't bother you? It terrifies me. Vladric's honesty was startling. But the alternative, never knowing you at all, seems worse. Helena's heart stuttered in her chest. What if I can't give you what you want? What if I'm too damaged, too stuck in the past? Then we will work through it together, or we will part as friends with no regrets. He cupped her face in both hands, the gesture achingly tender. I have lived 800 years, Helena. I have learned patience. I can wait for you to heal, to learn to live again. I can wait as long as you need. Why? The word came out desperate. Why me? You could have anyone. Because you looked at me with love in your eyes, even if it was meant for someone else. Because you are brave enough to keep living even when your heart is broken. Because in 8 centuries, I have never met anyone quite like you. His thumb traced her lower lip. And because when I held you last night, I felt less alone than I have in decades. Helena's breath caught. They were standing so close, and she could see every detail of his face, the sharp cheekbones, the silver eyes that seemed to see straight through her, the pale skin that looked carved from marble. He was beautiful and terrible and dangerous, and she wanted him in a way that felt like betrayal. I'm not ready, she whispered. I know. Vladric pressed a kiss to her forehead, chaste and gentle. Come, let me show you my world. He took her hand and they walked through the city, but not the city Helena knew. Vladric led her down streets that shouldn't exist, through doorways that opened into impossible spaces. He showed her a market where vampires traded in blood and favors, their pale faces luminous in the darkness. He took her to a hall where ancient ones gathered, creatures that looked like they'd walked out of medieval paintings, all sharp beauty and dangerous grace. Everyone they passed bowed to Vladric. Some looked curious about Helena, others hostile, but none dared speak against her presence. You really are a king, Helena said, awed. I am the oldest and strongest of my kind in this territory. That makes me king by default. Vladric guided her through a doorway that led to a balcony overlooking a vast underground chamber. Below, the vampire city stretched out, buildings carved from stone, lit by what looked like captured moonlight. This is my domain, my responsibility. It's beautiful. It is also exhausting. Centuries of politics and power struggles and maintaining order among immortals who remember when Rome still stood, he sighed. Sometimes I wonder what it would be like to simply walk away, to be no one important, answerable to nothing but my own desires. Why don't you? Because they need me, because I am strong enough to keep the peace, to prevent the chaos that would come if I abdicated. Vladric looked down at the city below. And because I have nothing else, no family, no true friends, only subjects and sycophants and those who fear me. Helena's heart ached for him. That sounds lonely. It is. He turned to her, and the raw honesty in his expression stole her breath. Which is why you are such a gift, Helena Carmichael. You see me as a person, not a king. You speak to me without fear or calculation. You are real in a way nothing else in my life has been for longer than I can remember. I don't know how to be what you need. You already are, simply by being yourself. Vladric took her hand again. Come, there is one more place I want to show you. They left the vampire city and emerged in a garden that shouldn't exist beneath the earth trees heavy with silver fruit, flowers that glowed in the darkness, a stream that ran with water clear as crystal. The air smelled like rain and growing things. I made this centuries ago, Vladric explained, when the weight of being king grew too heavy. This is where I come to remember what beauty looks like. Helena walked through the garden, touching delicate petals that felt like silk. I've never seen anything like this. It is yours if you want it. A place to escape when the world grows too loud. Vladric plucked one of the glowing flowers and tucked it behind her ear. A place where you can simply be. You're offering me a lot when you barely know me. Then help me know you better. He led her to a bench beside the stream and they sat together. Tell me everything. Your childhood, your dreams, your fears. I want to know it all. So Helena talked. She told him about growing up in a small town, about her parents who still called every Sunday, about wanting to be a writer but being too afraid to try. She told him about her friendship with Marcus, about the regulars at the bookstore she'd grown to love, about the small joys that had kept her going after Thomas died. Vladric listened like every word mattered, asking questions, laughing at the right moments, his attention absolute. And slowly, Helena felt something in her chest begin to loosen the tight knot of grief that had lived there for 3 years. Your turn, she said when she'd talked herself hoarse. Tell me about being 800 years old. Vladric's laugh was soft. That would take considerably longer than one night. Then give me the highlights. He told her about being turned during a war she'd only read about in history books, about the vampire who had made him a cruel creature who had wanted a weapon, not a companion, about fighting his way to power through sheer stubborn will, about building the underground city, about the centuries of watching the world change above while he remained static below. Do you ever wish you were human again? Helena asked. Sometimes, when I see mortals loving each other without the weight of eternity. When I watch humans create art and music and beauty because they know their time is limited. He looked at her. But immortality has its gifts too. I have seen wonders you could not imagine. I have watched civilizations rise and fall. I have learned things that would take a dozen human lifetimes. And you've been alone through all of it. Not entirely. I have had companions over the centuries, lovers even. Vladric's expression grew distant. But immortality creates distance. Everyone I cared for either died or grew tired of me. Eventually, I stopped trying until now. Until you threw yourself into my arms and wept for a love I could not help but admire. He turned to face her fully. You made me remember what it was like to want connection, to crave it so badly it aches. Helena's pulse quickened. Vladric, I know you are not ready. I know you still love your husband and I would never ask you to stop. His hand found hers again. But I am asking for a chance. Time to prove that I can be someone you trust, someone you might eventually care for. I already care for you. The admission surprised her. I shouldn't, not this fast, but I do. The smile that crossed Vladric's face was radiant. Then that is enough for now. They stayed in the garden until Helena's exhaustion became too obvious to ignore. Vladric returned her to her apartment, but this time he walked her to her door instead of vanishing immediately. Tomorrow? He asked. Tomorrow, Helena agreed. He kissed her hand again, lingering this time, and she felt the coolness of his lips like a brand. Then he was gone, and she was alone with her racing heart. Inside, Helena caught sight of Thomas's photo on her nightstand. She picked it up, studying his familiar face. I think I'm falling for him, she whispered to the image. I don't know how it happened so fast, but it did. And I feel guilty, like I'm betraying you. But I also feel alive again, and I think maybe that's okay. The photo, of course, didn't answer. But Helena thought she felt something shift in the air, something that felt like permission. Like Thomas's love reaching across death to tell her it was all right to move forward. She set the photo down and went to sleep with the glowing flower from Vladric's garden still tucked behind her ear. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of stolen nights and whispered conversations. Helena's days belonged to the bookstore and her normal life, but her nights became Vladric's. He showed her every corner of his world, the vampire courts where politics played out in deadly games, the fighting rings where immortals settled disputes, the libraries that held books from civilizations long dead. And he listened as she talked about Thomas, about her grief, about the slow process of learning to live with loss. He never grew impatient or jealous, just held her hand and let her process at her own pace. Marcus noticed the change immediately. You're glowing, he said one afternoon, studying her across the bookstore counter. Like, actually glowing. This guy must be amazing. Helena smiled. He is. He's patient and kind and he actually listens. When do I get to meet him? I don't know if that's possible. She thought about trying to explain that her boyfriend was that what he was? Couldn't go out in sunlight and lived in an underground city. He works nights. Odd schedule. Well, as long as he's treating you right. Marcus's expression turned serious. You deserve to be happy, Helena. You know that, right? I'm starting to believe it. That night, Vladric met her at the cemetery as usual, but his expression was troubled. What's wrong? Helena asked immediately. There is a situation in my court, a challenge to my authority from one of the elder vampires. Vladric's jaw tightened. He believes I have grown weak, distracted. He is not entirely wrong. Fear shot through Helena. What does that mean? It means I must deal with him decisively, or risk civil war among my kind. He pulled her close. It means I may be occupied for several nights, unable to see you. I can wait. I know you can. But I do not want to. Vladric pressed his forehead to hers. I have grown accustomed to your company, Helena. These nights with you have become the center of my existence. Then handle your politics and come back to me. She cupped his face in her hands. I'm not going anywhere. Promise me. I promise. Vladric kissed her then, properly for the first time. His lips were cool and gentle, and Helena felt something in her chest crack open, not breaking, but blooming. She kissed him back with 3 years of loneliness and longing, with the tentative hope that maybe she could love again after all. When they finally parted, both were breathing hard. I must go, Vladric said roughly. But know that I will return to you as soon as I am able. Be safe. He smiled, fierce and proud. I am 800 years old, my Helena. I did not survive this long by being careless. Then he was gone, and Helena was left alone in the cemetery with her racing heart and the taste of him still on her lips. 4 days passed without word from Vladric. Helena tried not to worry, tried to focus on work and normal life, but fear gnawed at her. She had no way to contact him, no way to know if he was all right. On the 5th night, she went to the cemetery despite the rain that had been falling since afternoon. She stood at Thomas's grave, shivering and soaked, and prayed to whoever might be listening that Vladric was safe. You are going to catch your death. Helena spun to find Vladric standing behind her, looking immaculate despite the downpour. Relief hit her so hard she nearly sobbed. You're okay, she threw herself at him, not caring about the rain or propriety or anything, except that he was there and whole and alive. I was so worried, I apologize for the delay. Vladric held her close, one hand stroking her wet hair. The situation was more complex than anticipated, but it is handled now. What happened? The challenger is dead, my authority is re-established, and I made it very clear to my court that you are under my protection now and always. He pulled back to look at her. You are soaked through. Come, let me get you warm. They went to his chambers in the underground city, and Vladric wrapped her in soft blankets while a fire roared to life in the hearth. Helena's teeth were chattering too hard to speak, so she just let him care for her, bringing hot tea, rubbing warmth back into her hands, murmuring reassurances. You could have died, she finally managed. But I did not. I told you I am difficult to kill. Vladric settled beside her, pulling her against his chest. Were you truly so worried? Of course I was. Helena stopped, the words catching in her throat. Say it, Vladric urged gently. I love you. The admission felt like stepping off a cliff. I know it's too soon. I know I should still be grieving Thomas, but I can't help it. These weeks with you have made me feel alive again, and the thought of losing you terrified me. Vladric's arms tightened around her. You are not betraying your late husband by loving again, Helena. The heart is not a finite resource. It can hold space for both grief and new joy. I know, but it still feels complicated. Love is always complicated. He tilted her chin up to meet his gaze. And for what it is worth, I love you too. Desperately. Completely. In a way I have not loved anyone in centuries. Helena's breath caught. Really? Really? You have reminded me what it means to care about something beyond power and politics. You have given me a reason to want tomorrow when I have spent decades simply enduring existence. Vladric kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. You are my miracle, Helena Carmichael, and I will spend whatever time you give me proving that your trust is not misplaced. They stayed like that for hours, wrapped around each other, whispering promises and dreams, and when Helena finally fell asleep in his arms, she felt safe and loved and whole for the first time since Thomas died. Over the following weeks their relationship deepened. Vladric courted her with old-world grace, bringing her books from his ancient library, teaching her to dance the way they had in his mortal lifetime, showing her the history of the world through immortal eyes. And Helena brought him back to humanity, dragging him to movies, late showings, after dark, teaching him about modern music, making him laugh with terrible jokes. But there were challenges too. The vampire court did not universally approve of their king's attachment to a mortal. Helena caught hostile looks from some of the elder vampires, heard whispers about how she was a distraction, a weakness. Vladric shut down any direct challenges with ruthless efficiency, but the undercurrent of disapproval remained. They think I'm making you soft, Helena said one night. Let them think what they wish. I am no less effective as a ruler for loving you. Vladric's expression was fierce. And anyone who dares harm you will learn exactly how soft I am not. But the fear lingered. Helena was mortal, fragile in a way that terrified her now that she had something to lose again. Every time she descended into the vampire city, she was aware of being surrounded by creatures that could kill her without effort. The crisis came on a cold December night. Helena was in Vladric's chambers, reading while he attended to court business, when the door burst open. A vampire she didn't recognize stood there, pale and beautiful and radiating menace. "So this is the mortal who has captured our king's attention." The vampire's smile was all teeth. "How disappointing. I expected someone more impressive." Helena stood slowly, heart racing. "Who are you?" "Lucien, and I am here to deliver a message." He moved faster than she could track, suddenly close enough to touch. "Some of us believe Vladric's attachment to you has made him unfit to rule. We have decided to remove the problem." Terror shot through her. "Vladric will kill you, only if he arrives in time." Lucien's hand closed around her throat, lifting her off her feet. "Nothing personal, little mortal. You are simply in the way." Helena clawed at his hand, unable to breathe, unable to scream. Black spots danced in her vision. This was how she died, not old and peaceful, but strangled by a vampire in an underground palace. Then Lucien was gone, ripped away from her with devastating force. Helena collapsed, gasping for air, and looked up to see Vladric. He was terrifying. His eyes had gone completely silver, his fangs fully extended, and the air around him seemed to crackle with barely contained violence. He held Lucien by the throat, lifting the other vampire like he weighed nothing. "You dared touch what is mine." Vladric's voice was death itself. "You dared threaten her in my own home." "The court," Lucien choked out. "The court answers to me." The words echoed through the chamber. "And you have just signed your death warrant." What happened next was brutal and quick. Helena turned away, unable to watch, but she heard it, the sounds of a vampire being torn apart, of final death coming for an immortal creature. When silence finally fell, she looked back to find Vladric standing alone, covered in blood that was rapidly disappearing as it fed his healing Helena. He crossed to her in 2 strides, hands hovering over her like he was afraid to touch. "Did he hurt you? Are you injured?" "I'm okay." Her voice came out rough from her bruised throat. "You saved me. I almost did not arrive in time." Vladric's expression was anguished. "I felt your fear through the bond we share, but I had to fight through 3 others who tried to stop me from reaching you. If I had been even seconds later, but you weren't." Helena reached up to cup his face, ignoring the way her hands shook. "I'm alive, I'm safe, you will never be safe in my world." Vladric pulled her close, his whole body trembling. "I have made you a target simply by loving you. Every vampire who wants to weaken me now knows that you are the way to do it." The truth of his words settled over Helena like a weight. She had been so focused on the wonder of falling in love again that she hadn't truly considered the danger. But Lucien's attack had made it horrifyingly clear. Being with Vladric put her life at risk every day. "What do we do?" she whispered. "I do not know." Vladric's voice broke. "I cannot give you up. I have tried to imagine it, tried to convince myself that letting you go would keep you safe. But I am too selfish, too desperate for your love. I cannot do it. I don't want you to give me up either." "Then we find another solution." He pulled back to look at her, and the determination in his eyes was absolute. "I will make you untouchable. I will declare you my queen, place you under protection so strong that harming you would mean death for anyone foolish enough to try." "Your queen?" Helena's eyes widened. "Vladric, I'm human. I don't know anything about vampire politics. You know enough. You are intelligent, compassionate, strong enough to survive losing your first love, and brave enough to risk loving again." Vladric's hands framed her face. "And you are mine. That makes you royalty by default. The court will never accept me. The court will accept what I tell them to accept, or they will die." His expression turned fierce. "I am done accommodating those who would threaten what I love. From this moment forward, you are under my absolute protection. Anyone who touches you answers to me." He called a court assembly that very night. Helena stood beside his throne, still shaken from the attack, and watched as every vampire in the territory gathered. They filled the great hall. Hundreds of pale faces turned toward their king. Vladric stood, and silence fell immediately. "Tonight, one of our own attempted to murder the woman I love." His voice carried through the hall. "Lucien believed that by killing Helena Carmichael he could weaken me. He was wrong. His death should serve as a lesson to all of you." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Vladric's hand found Helena's, squeezing gently. "I have ruled you for 6 centuries with fairness and strength. I have kept the peace, maintained our secrecy, and protected our kind from discovery. In all that time I have asked little for myself." He looked down at Helena, and his expression softened. "But now I am asking. I am claiming this woman as my queen, my mate, my heart. She is under my protection now and forever. Anyone who harms her will face final death. Anyone who disrespects her will answer to me. Is this understood? The silence was absolute. I asked a question. Power rolled off Vladric in waves. Is this understood? Yes, my king. The response came from hundreds of throats simultaneously. Good. Vladric pulled Helena closer. You are dismissed. The vampires filed out, some looking curious, others hostile, many simply resigned. When they were finally alone, Helena let out a shaky breath. That was terrifying, but effective. Vladric turned to face her fully. They know now that you are not to be touched. The protection of a vampire king is absolute, and if someone still tries, then they die. His expression was implacable. I will burn this city to the ground before I allow harm to come to you, Helena. You must believe that. She did. She had seen the way he'd torn Lucian apart, the absolute devastation he was capable of. It should have frightened her. Instead, she felt safe. I love you, she said simply. Vladric kissed her, deep and claiming, and I love you, more than I have words to express. That night marked a turning point. Vladric became even more protective, keeping Helena close whenever she visited the underground city, assigning guards to watch her building when she was home. It should have felt suffocating, but instead Helena felt cherished. Christmas came, and Helena invited Vladric to her apartment for the first time. She cooked dinner something simple, though he couldn't eat it, and they exchanged gifts by her small tree. Helena gave him a leather-bound journal, for recording your memories, so you don't forget the centuries you've lived. Vladric gave her a necklace, a pendant shaped like a crescent moon, set with stones that glowed with captured moonlight. So you carry a piece of my world with you always. She put it on immediately, and Vladric fastened the clasp, pressing a kiss to the back of her neck. Thank you for this, he said quietly. For sharing your traditions with me. I had forgotten what holidays felt like. Thank you for making me want to celebrate again. Helena turned in his arms. Last year I couldn't even put up a tree. This year I wanted to, because of you. They spent the night curled together on her couch, watching old movies and talking about everything and nothing. And when Vladric had to leave before dawn, Helena walked him to the door with a smile instead of tears. I'll see you tomorrow? She asked. Always tomorrow. He kissed her softly. Sleep well, my love. January brought new challenges. One of the elder vampires, a woman named Serafina who had known Vladric for centuries, requested an audience. Helena sat beside Vladric's throne as Serafina approached, moving with the liquid grace of extreme age. My king, my queen. Serafina's bow was respectful, but her eyes were sharp. I come with a concern. Speak, Vladric commanded. The mortal queen is beloved to you, this is clear, but she is mortal, and mortals die. Serafina's gaze flicked to Helena. Have you considered what happens when her time comes? When age takes her from you? The words hit like a physical blow. Helena had been trying not to think about it, the fact that she was aging while Vladric remained frozen in time. That eventually death would part them just as it had parted her from Thomas. I have considered it, Vladric said quietly. And I will face that grief when it comes, but I will not deny myself her love now out of fear of future pain. Serafina studied them both. There is another option, you know, one you have not proposed. Helena's heart began to race. She knew what Serafina was suggesting, the same thing Vladric had carefully never mentioned in all their time together. I will not turn her without her consent, Vladric said firmly, and I will not pressure her to choose immortality simply to ease my fears. But you would turn her if she asked. In a heartbeat, his hand found Helena's, but only if she asked. Serafina nodded slowly. Then I have said my piece. Consider it, young queen. Immortality is not without cost, but neither is it without rewards. When she left, Helena sat in silence, processing. Vladric waited patiently, thumb stroking over her knuckles. You've never brought it up, Helena finally said. Turning me, because it has to be your choice, not mine. Vladric's expression was careful. I would love you as a vampire or as a human. I will love you until your last breath, and I will grieve you when you are gone. But I will not pressure you to become something you may not want to be. What if I did want it? What if I asked you to turn me? His silver eyes searched her face. Then I would explain exactly what it entails, the cost and the benefits. The ways you would change, and the ways you would remain yourself. And if you still wanted it after understanding fully, then yes, I would turn you. Helena took a shaky breath. Explain it all. So Vladric did. He told her about the transformation, 3 days of agony as her body died and reformed. About waking as a vampire, stronger and faster but forever changed. About the need for blood, the way sunlight would burn, the immortality that stretched out endlessly. You would be bound to me, he explained. The vampire who turns you becomes your sire, a connection that can never be fully broken. You would feel my emotions, know when I was near, be tied to me in ways that go beyond normal love. That doesn't sound bad. It also means you could never fully leave me, even if you wanted to. The sire bond is absolute. Vladric's expression was serious. I will not trap you with biology, Helena. You must be certain this is what you want. I need time to think about it. Take all the time you need. I am immortal, I can wait. But the question haunted Helena. She talked to Marcus about it carefully, without mentioning vampires, framing it as a hypothetical about whether she should commit fully to her relationship or hold back. Do you love him? Marcus asked. Yes. Does he treat you well? Better than I could have imagined. Then what's holding you back? Helena thought about that. Fear, partially. Fear of losing herself, of becoming something other than human. But also fear of losing Vladric, of growing old while he stayed young, of death separating them the way it had separated her from Thomas. She went to the cemetery to think, standing at Thomas's grave in the February cold. I need your advice, she told the headstone. I'm in love again, and he's offered me forever, literally forever. But taking it means giving up being human, giving up the life I knew. She touched the cold marble. What should I do? The wind picked up, swirling around her, and Helena could have sworn she felt something, a presence, a warmth, a sense of peace. Like Thomas was there, telling her it was okay to choose happiness. Okay to move forward. She found Vladric in his garden that night. I have an answer, she said without preamble. He turned to face her, expression carefully neutral. Tell me, I want you to turn me. Helena stepped closer. Not because I'm afraid of dying, not because I feel pressured, but because I love you, and the thought of spending eternity with you sounds like the greatest gift I could receive. Helena, I'm sure. She took his hands. I've thought about it carefully. I've considered what I'm giving up and what I'm gaining. And I choose you. I choose us. I choose forever. Vladric pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. You are certain? Absolutely certain? Then I will give you everything you ask for and more. He pulled back to look at her. But not tonight. First, you will say goodbye to your mortal life properly. You will tell your friends, settle your affairs, make peace with what you are leaving behind. How long? A month. 2. However long you need to be ready. Vladric cupped her face. This is not a decision to rush. So Helena began the process of closing one chapter of her life to begin another. She told Marcus first over coffee at their usual cafe. I'm moving, she said, out of the city, with Vladric. Marcus's face fell. What? Helena, that's so sudden. I know, but I love him, and he's asked me to be with him permanently. I can't pass that up. But what about the bookstore, your apartment, your whole life here? I'll help you find my replacement at the store. I'll sublet my apartment and my life. Helena smiled. My life is wherever he is now. Marcus studied her carefully. You're really happy with him? Happier than I've been since Thomas died, maybe happier than I've ever been. Then I'm happy for you. He hugged her tightly. But you better visit, or at least call. Helena promised, knowing she wouldn't be able to keep it. Once she was turned, her old life would have to stay in the past. It was a necessary sacrifice. She visited Thomas's grave one last time, bringing flowers and sitting in the grass beside his headstone. I'm leaving, she told him softly. Moving on, literally and figuratively. I'll always love you, that won't change. But I'm choosing to live again, and I hope you understand. She traced his name carved in marble. Thank you for the years we had. Thank you for teaching me what love looked like. I'll carry that with me forever. The wind rustled through the trees, and Helena felt that same sense of peace. Thomas was gone, but his love had been real, and it had shaped her into someone capable of loving again. That was its own kind of forever. She stood, brushing grass from her jeans, and walked away without looking back. The night of her transformation, Vladric prepared his chambers carefully. Soft blankets, cool water, everything she might need for the 3 days of agony to come. Last chance to change your mind, he said as Helena settled on his bed. I'm not changing my mind, she pulled him down beside her. I want this, I want you forever. Vladric kissed her deeply, pouring centuries of loneliness and longing into the contact. Then he pulled back and his expression turned serious. This will hurt, he warned. I know, and once it begins, there is no stopping it. You will die as a human and be reborn as a vampire. I understand. He searched her face one more time, then nodded. His fangs extended fully, sharp and deadly, and Helena tilted her head to expose her throat. I love you, she whispered, and I love you, in this life and the next. Vladric's fangs pierced her skin. The pain was immediate and overwhelming. Helena gasped as venom flooded her veins, burning through her like liquid fire. Vladric held her close, murmuring reassurances as he drank deep, taking her to the edge of death before pulling back. Now you drink from me. He bit his own wrist and blood welled up, impossibly red. Drink, Helena. Take my blood and be reborn. She latched onto his wrist, and power flooded her mouth, ancient and vast and utterly intoxicating. She drank until Vladric gently pulled away, and then the real pain began. Helena screamed as her body started dying. Every cell burned, every nerve shrieked. Vladric held her through it all, stroking her hair, whispering love and promises, his presence the only anchor in a sea of agony. 3 days passed in a haze of pain and darkness. Helena was aware of Vladric beside her constantly, feeding her blood when she needed it, keeping her cool, never leaving. And slowly, agonizingly, her human body died and her vampire one took its place. On the 3rd night, Helena opened her eyes. Everything was different. Colors were sharper, sounds clearer, scents overwhelmingly complex. She could hear Vladric's heartbeat beside her, slow and strong, could smell the blood in his veins, could see in perfect detail despite the darkness of the chamber. "Helena?" Vladric's voice was cautious, hopeful. "Can you hear me?" Yes, her own voice sounded different, clearer, stronger. "I can hear everything." She sat up, marveling at the way her body moved, fluid and graceful, strength singing through her muscles. Vladric watched her carefully, giving her space to adjust. "How do you feel?" he asked. Helena considered the question. She felt powerful and strange and hungry, desperately hungry. But underneath it all, she felt alive in a way she never had as a human. "I feel amazing." She turned to look at him, and her breath caught. Vladric had always been beautiful, but now she could see him properly, every detail of his face, the way power moved under his skin, the centuries of life in his silver eyes. "And you're even more incredible than I realized." His smile was radiant. "As are you, my love, you are magnificent." Helena moved to the mirror across the room, staring at her reflection. She looked like herself, but perfected, skin flawless and pale, eyes brighter, hair shinier. And when she smiled, she saw her own fangs, sharp and deadly. "I'm really a vampire," she breathed. "You are." Vladric came up behind her, arms wrapping around her waist. "You are immortal now, forever young, forever strong, forever mine." Helena leaned back against him, and the sire bond he'd warned her about suddenly made sense. She could feel his emotions, love and pride and fierce protectiveness, tangled with her own. It should have been overwhelming, but instead it felt right. Like they were two parts of a whole, finally joined. "I'm hungry," she admitted. "I know. Come, I will teach you to feed properly." Vladric took her hand and led her from the chamber. He taught her everything over the following weeks. How to hunt without killing. How to read human emotions to find willing donors. How to move with vampire speed and grace. Helena proved to be a quick study, her human compassion translating into a vampire who fed carefully and respected her prey. The court accepted her more readily now that she was one of them. Some still disapproved, but none dared challenge her openly, not when she stood beside Vladric with power singing through her veins and the absolute certainty of his love. Helena's mortal life faded like a dream. She missed Marcus sometimes, missed the simplicity of working in a bookstore and worrying about normal things. But immortality offered its own gifts: time to read every book ever written, to learn languages and skills, to travel the world with Vladric at her side. They returned to the cemetery once, months after her transformation. Helena stood at Thomas's grave, and for the first time she felt only peace. "Thank you for loving me," she told the headstone. "Thank you for showing me what happiness looked like. I'll carry that forward into forever." Vladric's hand found hers, squeezing gently. "Are you all right?" "Yes." Helena looked up at him, at the vampire who had held her while she wept and offered her eternity. "I'm more than all right. I'm home." They walked out of the cemetery together, two immortals in love, and Helena never looked back. Years passed, then decades. Helena grew into her power, becoming a queen in truth, respected and admired throughout the vampire world. She and Vladric ruled together, a partnership built on love and trust and the bond that connected their very souls. They faced challenges, of course. Rival vampires who tested their strength, politics that grew complicated, the occasional need to relocate as the mortal world changed around them. But they faced it all together, and that made all the difference. On their 50th anniversary, counted from the night they met in the fog, Vladric took Helena back to that cemetery. It had changed over the decades, new graves added, old ones crumbling, but Thomas's headstone still stood. "Do you regret it?" Vladric asked. "Giving up your mortality?" Helena thought about the question seriously. She missed sunlight sometimes, missed the simplicity of being human. But she had gained so much more than she'd lost. "No," she said honestly. "I regret nothing. You gave me a reason to live again after I thought my life was over. You loved me through my grief and never asked me to forget my past. You offered me forever, and every day of that forever has been a gift." Vladric pulled her close, and the sire bond hummed with shared love. "You were my gift, Helena, my miracle in the fog, the one who reminded me what it meant to feel, to love, to want more than mere existence." "We saved each other," Helena said softly. "Yes, and we will continue saving each other, night after night, for all the eternities to come." They kissed there in the cemetery where they'd met, two immortals who had found love in the midst of grief and loss, And when they finally pulled apart, they walked into the night together, king and queen, sire and child, two souls bound by love that would last forever. The fog rolled in as they disappeared into the darkness, but Helena wasn't afraid anymore. She had learned that endings were also beginnings, that love could be found even in the deepest grief, that choosing to live truly live was the bravest thing anyone could do. And she had learned it all from the vampire king who had held her while she wept and loved her enough to offer her eternity. Their story became legend in the vampire world, the tale of a grieving widow and an ancient king who found each other in the fog and chose forever. Young vampires told it to their fledglings, a reminder that love could transcend death, that connection mattered more than power, that even immortals needed companionship. But for Helena and Vladric, it was simply their truth, their love story, their forever. They continued ruling the underground city. But they also made time for joy. They traveled the world, seeing sights that changed with every century. They built a library together, filling it with books from every era. They returned to Vladric's garden often, walking among glowing flowers and talking about everything and nothing. And sometimes, on foggy nights, they returned to that cemetery, not out of sadness, but out of gratitude, because that was where their story began, where grief and loneliness transformed into love and hope. Helena would stand at Thomas's grave and thank him silently for the love he'd given her, for teaching her that her heart was capable of profound connection. And Vladric would stand beside her, patient and understanding, grateful to the man who had loved his queen first and shaped her into someone capable of loving again. Then they would leave together, hand in hand, two immortals in love, walking into a future that stretched out endlessly before them. Because Helena had mistaken him for her late husband and wept, and the vampire king had held her anyway. He had offered comfort when she needed it most, love when she thought herself incapable of receiving it, and eternity when she was ready to choose it. And in return, Helena had given him everything: her trust, her heart, her mortality, and her forever. She had reminded him what it meant to be more than a king, to be a partner and a lover, and someone's entire world. Together they were complete. Together they were infinite. And as centuries continued to pass, their love never dimmed. It grew stronger with every shared moment, every overcome challenge, every quiet night spent in each other's arms. They had found each other in the fog, two lonely souls seeking connection, and they had built something beautiful from grief and loss. Their ending was really a beginning, the start of forever, the promise of eternal love, the certainty that no matter what came, they would face it together. Helena Carmichael, once a grieving widow who talked to graves, had become Helena Westerling, vampire queen and eternal companion to the king who had saved her. And Vladric Westerling, once an ancient king who had forgotten what it meant to feel, had remembered love through the mortal who wept in his arms. Their story was complete, their threads woven together into something unbreakable. And as they stood together in their underground palace, surrounded by their court and their city and the life they had built, they knew with absolute certainty that they had made the right choice. Forever stretched out before them, bright and beautiful and theirs. And they would spend every moment of it loving each other with the intensity of two souls who had found their perfect match. The fog had brought them together, but love had made them eternal. And they lived happily, completely, wholly together for all the endless nights to come.